Our next guest is back for his sixth visit to the 2 Months podcast. He's from the Darren Dreger Hockey Podcast and TSN. We would like to welcome in TSN Hockey Insider Darren Dreger. Dregs, how's it going?
Yeah, you know what? It's going okay. It's going okay. I'm not complaining again. When I talk about the weather, I fondly remember my days in Western Canada, and can't wait to get back there. And you ride the highs and the lows, and
Yeah.
the lows get really low when you're talking about dash 45 ish. Well, here in the Greater Toronto area, man, it gets to minus 10, and people are borderline panicking. If it gets to minus 20, yeah, there's some panic, and yeah, it's understandable. We've got a homeless society in Toronto that can't be overlooked. But I'm looking outside my office window right now, and so traditionally we get a dump of snow in late January, and then February can be a bit of a mess, which it has been. And then you hope that you're turning the corner by early to mid-March. So now that I look out the window and I see about 3 feet of snow, which is a bit unusual here,
Yeah.
I'm looking for mid-March. I want out of this.
Yeah. You love that golf too. Get into that golf spirit, right? So,
Well, golf doesn't love me, but I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Same here for sure. I guess we'll start with the big news. Toronto Maple Leafs big trade on the weekend. I guess to shore up some question marks on the back end. Thoughts on the trade for Ilya Lyubushkin and Dzingel for Nick Ritchie, and it's some draft picks involved.
Yeah, well, number one, it's a significant deal, if for no other reason. The Toronto Maple Leafs move a piece in Nick Ritchie in a contract that they just didn't have a use for. Look, no harm, no foul here. They signed Nick Ritchie in good faith. They gave him nothing but opportunity to play in their top six, and he just couldn't do it. And even when he was given less of a role, less responsibility, he just didn't seem to be a fit with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And given where the Leafs are cap related, you just can't keep a player like that and have that money on your cap in that contract. So Kyle Dubas, I thought, did pretty good work in managing this deal. In Lyubushkin, I feel like it's still a little bit untapped, even though he's 27 years old.
Yeah.
We can basically see what he is, and he's a big, strong, physical, shot blocking, shutdown defenseman. And if he slides into Toronto's third pair for the second half of this season and creates, if nothing else, more competition with the likes of Liljegren, less so Sandin, but let's put him into that category. And then you've got guys like Jake Muzzin and Justin Hall looking over their shoulder. That's not a bad thing. But I also, when I look at it, and I'm talking specifically here about defense, this is a deal that doesn't preclude the Maple Leafs from doing something more significant, right? So there's no guarantee that Kyle Dubas is going to, throw everything needed to acquire Ben Sherratt or another piece like that. But I know that he's still very much interested. And then Ryan Dzingel, I don't know if you follow Bobby Ryan on Twitter or not.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, former teammates. And I like Bobby's honesty, and he was very honest last night in responding to, Dzingel being placed on waivers and going, I just don't get it. This guy can play on most teams' top six. Toronto's a little different, right? They're heavily weighted up there, but you throw him on the wing with a good center, and according to Bobby Ryan, he's going to get you 15 to 20. But he just doesn't seem to be able to dig in and find a home, a longer term landing spot. But I like it because with some opportunity, the guy can still flat out fly out there. He's got good speed. So I wouldn't be surprised if Toronto finds a way to sneak him into the lineup at some point.
Yeah, and obviously I'll have to clear waivers today. Do you think anyone takes a flyer on him in that aspect that you just broke down what he can do and what he can bring to the table?
I wouldn't be surprised if someone does. You can never have too much speed in your lineup. I mean, what's the risk in this, right? There isn't. If you're a non-cap team and you don't like the way the trade market looks for depth forwards, you know what, man? I look at the New York Rangers here, and Chris Drury has been looking for a middle forward for a long, long time. Certainly since Sammy Blais went down with the knee injury.
Correct.
Again, you're talking about a little bit of cap space here, but maybe the New York Rangers are a team that just takes a flyer on this guy and says, you know what, we don't have to spend any asset to get him. Okay, we got to make a little bit of room cap wise, but he can skate. So put him out there on a line with Chris Kreider and see what happens. I mean, that might be a fit. It may not. So in answer to your question, I wouldn't be surprised either way if he gets picked or if he goes unclaimed.
Yeah. Would you say, to finish up on the Leafs here, I don't think they get much production. I think their last place production from the back end for by defensemen. What do you think happens here? I think Kyle Dubas has done a tremendous job so far to date.
Yeah.
The Bunting signing, Camp signing, Kasha signing, like these are some really good signings. Losing Hyman was a loss, but he's kind of helped fill that void. And obviously Mikheyev's come in after his injury and has done well. But what do you think the Leafs do? Do you think there's an offensive defenseman out there that they could add before the deadline?
Well, they're looking. I mentioned Benny Sherratt, and Sherratt can play just about any way you need him to play, right? You get up against the physical teams, he can play that heavy game. I'm wondering what's going on with Josh Manson in Anaheim. I'm looking at Colin Miller. He's hurt with the Buffalo Sabres, but he'll come back in early March, and he'd be a real nice add. Petry's out there. Who else am I missing? Yeah, there's a number of defensemen, offensive guys that are available. Maybe the price goes down between now and as you get closer to March. But if there was a deal to be made, Dubas or any other team that's in the market for a defenseman of that magnitude would have already made the deal. I don't know how many times we need to hear Kent Hughes or the Montreal Canadiens say, look, we're open for business here. Yeah. We'll move Petry, we'll move Sherratt, we'll move these guys. You got to pay the price. So the price is too much, according to the buyers. So we'll see if that changes. If it does, then I think Toronto sees the same need on that back end that you see. But if the price does not come down, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Toronto shift over and try and get a top 9 forward, top 9 winger. Yeah. And maybe they see that to some degree. If Dzingel slips through waivers, there's no chance or not much of a risk in giving him a chance. If not, I think they test that market, for a winger, a guy who can bump into the top 6 with a change of scenery, perhaps. And Leaf fans won't like this. Maybe they do nothing else. They've spent a lot of asset in draft picks and some prospects over the last couple of seasons chasing it. We remember the Nick Foligno deal. Yep. But that didn't work out for the Maple Leafs. So there's lessons to be learned in doing that. And my understanding is it's a pretty good group. The chemistry around that organization is pretty solid. So you don't want to overthink it either. But again, shoring up that defense and maybe adding a little bit more offensive weapon back there, it's a priority. It's whether or not they have the stomach to pay the price. Yeah,
for sure. Another team that kind of got the jump start on some trades here was the Calgary Flames getting Tyler Toffoli. Thoughts on that trade? Coming in, I think it's he had that goal the first game, and he looked maybe not as comfortable right now, but looks like they switched up the lines and they'll go with a different lineup tonight or this afternoon when they play. But do you know Brad Treliving? You know him pretty well. He's a GM that is always involved in a lot of things, but seems to make these moves before the deadline. How much more moves do you think he's going to make before the trade deadline or after?
I think he's going to add a defenseman as well. I know you follow and watch Insider Trading on SportsCenter and TSN. And we openly talked about how the deal with the Montreal Canadiens had the potential to be a much bigger deal. Correct. And Calgary, like a handful of other teams, St. Louis, Toronto, go down the list, Boston, they like Ben Sherratt. It's just to acquire Ben Sherratt and Tyler Toffoli. You're talking about a deal that really robs you of both draft pick and or top prospect. And they give up Emil Heineman and a first and a fifth to acquire Tyler Toffoli. So now you throw in either another first or a top prospect and something else to include Sherratt in the deal, and it gets real expensive in a hurry. But I do think that Treliving is going to try and maybe add a little bit more on that back end as well, but not a whole lot different than what we just said about the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Calgary Flames have something going right now. And, it starts with their goaltending. Jacob Markstrom has been lights out good all season long. Their top line with Goudreau and Tkachuk and Lindholm, for the most part, have been dynamic. They're starting to get a little bit more offense from other corners, but they're going to need more of that, which is why they brought in Tyler Toffoli. And, with all due respect to Tyler Toffoli, because he became the focus of the trade from Calgary's standpoint, I'm pretty sure Treliving also tried to get Josh Anderson. he tried to acquire him when Anderson was in Columbus and, didn't want to, again, meet the asking price. And Montreal found a way to get it done with Domi going the other way. But Treliving has always kept an eye on Josh Anderson because there aren't that many true power forwards in today's NHL game. And Josh Anderson is that. So Calgary, I think, has the stomach to add a little bit more, but being mindful of what they've already done and the fact that they've got some pretty good mojo around that club.
Yeah, no, it's been a winners of 9 straight. They're rolling right now, and it's been a good thing for them. And we agreed last year when you were on the pod that they were probably the biggest disappointment last year.
Yeah,
and a big comeback season this year. So it's good to see there. The St. Louis Blues were in town on Saturday night in Toronto. Ville Husso got the start, four straight starts for him. Jordan Binnington, I believe he's on the first year of a 6-year contract. He's struggling right now. Where do you think things go with him here, Dregs? Do you think it's just kind of hit the reset button? Like it's not like he's lost his mojo to never going to get back to that part. But what do you think happens there in St. Louis? Because they're going to need him going forward for sure.
You're 100%, but they also know that he can be a difference maker, right? I mean, without Jordan Binnington, the St. Louis Blues are not recent Stanley Cup champions. That's just the reality of it. He took over and seized an opportunity. And they basically rode his coattails the rest of the way in that second half of the year and then came together as a group around him. It wasn't all about Jordan Binnington. But because that's not that long ago, I feel like, there's still a lot of belief and there's a lot of confidence in the game that Binnington can play. He's just not playing it yet. So I don't think they have much choice. It's not like you've got goaltenders of that magnitude or ilk that are just readily available. And the St. Louis Blues, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that they're interested in Ben Sherratt. Well, that's an area of need for them too, right? I think they love to acquire Jacob Chikrin from the Arizona Coyotes. They just don't like what the asking price is that's been established by Billy Armstrong and the Coyotes. So when you've got a wish list like that includes high quality defense, then how are you going to improve or even stabilize your goaltending from outside? So the answer has to come from the inside. And I think that they still believe strongly that Binnington is more than capable to right the ship. And I'm sure he's confident of that as well. Goalies are no different than any other player. When a goalie goes through a 10-game skid, if you want to call it that, slump, whatever, I mean, it's amplified, right? It's the goaltender. And when a goalie makes a mistake, 9 times out of 10, it ends up beyond the goal line and in their net. So that's why it becomes such a more glaring issue. Whereas if a forward goes 10 games without scoring, we acknowledge that he's in a slump, but, we're not writing, miles of copy on it. You just wait and expect him to play out of it. And I feel like that's the same level of expectation with Binnington.
Yeah, no, same here. And he's a good goaltender, and I think he'll find his way back. And he's got that swagger about him too that kind of gives you that belief there. We'll switch over to the Edmonton Oilers. Woodcroft comes in, get that coach bump, win their first 4 games, I believe, with him. A tough loss last night against Minnesota, but they're going to go on a road trip here, Dregs. It's going to be a pretty tough one to start. They got the Florida teams to start, and then they got the Carolina Hurricanes right after that. So is this kind of a big measure stick for the Oilers here with what's going on going forward and kind of what they might need to do at the deadline to, right the ship to make sure they make the playoffs?
Yeah. It feels like every 5-game segment is a measuring stick for the Edmonton Oilers just because of the hole that they dug themselves into. Look, last night, Mike Smith didn't have a good start, so, that's going to be big for the market moving forward, right? They're counting on Koskinen and Mike Smith just kind of rounding into form, just giving them average goaltending. You need above average goaltending to go deep into the playoffs. But right now, the Oilers would just settle on average, stay healthy, and just, give them a chance. And for the most part, since Smith has been back, that has been the case. He's certainly given them a chance. And he's played some good games. When their goaltending, gets porous, then that just seems to take away from the entire team level of confidence. But more importantly, I look at the defense of the Oilers, and man, we've spent a lot of time talking about defense here on the podcast, but it's just because it's such a substantial need. Ken Holland a month or so ago, whenever it was, came out and said, look, yeah, at some point you got to stop trading first round draft picks and top prospects and plug in holes. You just have to stop. And so he doesn't have the appetite to do it. I feel like as big a need as they have in goal, I feel like, Smith and Koskinen will stabilize. They've shown some evidence of that. So maybe the goaltending need is something you address in the offseason. Well, you're going to have to. I mean, come on. You can't have a 40-year-old goaltender and Mikko Koskinen, again, who's a backup goaltender, and, the market just picking at the carcass of these two guys every single game. But Kenny needs help on that right side on defense, right? You've got Evan Bouchard, who isn't quite ready yet, started strong this season and has had his problems, which isn't unusual for a young developing defenseman. And then you've got Tyson Barrie on that right side, and it's problematic for the Edmonton Oilers when those two guys are both in the lineup. So as big of a need as the world might look at, the hockey world looks at and says, well, they got to do something in goal. I think it's just as significant a need on the right side on defense. So I do think that the Oilers are going to try and be active and may not have a choice other than to give up a prospect, a young NHL player, or a top draft pick.
Yeah. Do you think it's, would you prefer to get Fleury, or is it Varlamov? Like, obviously Varlamov has 1 year left on his deal, to shore up that side of the goaltending front for them.
That's tough, man. That's tough. I don't think Marc-Andre Fleury is going to Edmonton, number one. He has trade protection. I'm not convinced he's going to be traded. And only because, when you get to a certain place in your career, as much as it is about chasing the Stanley Cup, it's also about giving your family some endurance and stability here. Marc-Andre Fleury's family has been in upheaval for a significant amount of time. Yes, of course, he's going to have conversations with his agent, Alan Walsh, and then they'll have conversations with Kyle Davidson or whomever is the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks at that point. Varlamov, I'm not sold on. If it, look, what do I know when it comes to acquiring players? But I would be a little bit more careful. I would look hard at Anton Forsberg in Ottawa, and I don't know that Anton Forsberg is a significant upgrade, but unless there is a piece that you truly believe in, that you feel like you've got no choice but to make a move on, well, then maybe you just try and continue to fill the cracks, and get into the offseason and then, make a more significant play at that point. Anton Forsberg has given the Ottawa Senators quality starts for the most part. He went through a stretch where he was allowing at least one ugly goal per game. But he seems to have cleaned that up. And they had Phil Gustafson. We did that game yesterday. Tough game against the New York Rangers.
Yep.
He was terrific. He was terrific. I mean, he got Panarin. Artemi Panarin had a power play goal, a rocket under the bar, and Dylan Strome scored on a nifty play by Artemi Panarin. But, you get Matt Murray back healthy this week, and they've got Gustafson. Who knows what they're going to do? Anton Forsberg would be a goalie that I'd take a look at.
Yeah, no, that's a good one for sure. So keep an eye on that for sure. On our podcast today, we have Matt Benning. His interview will follow yours. And we just want to touch on the Predators. Some Predator fans will probably tune in to listen. And is there anything going on there? Is anything to watch for the Predators as they gear up for the second half of the season? It's obviously a little tough stretch there. They lost four of their last games there, but going into a tough one against Florida tomorrow night. But thoughts on the Pred season to date?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really, really good. Aside from recent history here where they're going through that tough patch as you described, they're overachieving for me. But they've got some unbelievable pieces there. UC Saros has been terrific this year for the Nashville Predators. Roman Josi, I can't figure out when we talk about Norris Trophy winners why we don't give him more credit. And I understand. I mean, Cale Makar is far more flashy. Adam Fox is continuing to do well. Victor Hedman is just a flat out beast. But in that realm, of course, of elite has to be Roman Josi of the Nashville Predators. Yet he somehow, some way flies under the radar, which just perplexes me. As to your question, what should we expect from the Nashville Predators? You never underestimate the veteran management of David Poile. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does something more on the side of tinkering. I haven't heard the Preds name out there a whole lot in terms of trade negotiations or discussions, but that's not to say he's not working at it. Obviously is. I just also wonder if they're realistic in Nashville and they realize that this has been a real good year for them, but maybe not the year. They've got some contracts they're going to have to address. Forsberg comes to mind and others. So is this the year where Poile says, again, because he has been pretty active in the past, when he felt like his team was a Stanley Cup contender because they were, he wasn't afraid to make some bold moves. So I don't know which way he's thinking. Is he thinking more on the side of, hey, I don't want to spoil what we have, but I also don't see us being a top contender. I don't know that. What I know is that when David Poile and the Nashville Predators went to the Stanley Cup final, man, you couldn't slap the smile off his face. And, he's an older general manager, right? And he realizes that maybe he doesn't have too many kicks at this. So that's always in the back of my mind when I think of what David Poile might do. The hockey side of me is like, I don't know, maybe they just keep their powder dry and just push with what they've got. Then the flip side is, as I've just described, you've got a hungry general manager who 100% is all in and chasing the Stanley Cup. So a story that we're going to have to continue to watch for sure.
For sure. And one player on their team, Tanner Jeannot, he's having a hell of a season, Dregs. This guy is a beast. I think he leads the league in fights, 15 goals, 14 assists, 29 points, going into game 51 for him. Thoughts on the season he's had so far this year?
Well, I mean, you've just embodied why he's had a breakthrough year and why he's so important to the team, right? It's not just about having that deterrent on your roster. This guy can just flat out play the game. And so he has so many weapons now in his arsenal. The one thing that I think of when I think of players like that, and there aren't that many, like there are lots of gamers, there are lots of high character players around the National Hockey League. But when you've got an arsenal of a little bit of everything, and you can clearly generate the offense, and he's most definitely been able to do that as he does, that takes a toll. There's some serious wear and tear on the body. So knock on wood, as long as, he can stay healthy, then he's the type of player that so many teams wish they had, right? And I'm not conjuring up some sort of trade scenario here. I'm just saying that's true. We talked about Brad Treliving and the Calgary Flames earlier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a team that plays with some bite. So when you can add a little bit more bite, or you've got it, internally, you hold on dearly for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's a fun player to watch for sure. It's good to see that type of player is still thriving in the NHL.
I know.
It's great that you and I like that type of hockey for sure. So a few more here. We'll go to the Vancouver Canucks. Jim Rutherford talked about that he feels that their forward group is a bit slow. Miller's name's out there, Besser's name's out there in trade talks, I guess, at times, and it seems like maybe Miller's getting a little bit frustrated about that. But where do you think things stand for the Canucks? Very important. They got to make the playoffs here. Tough night on Saturday night against the Ducks there, but
they're still very much in the analyzing phase, right? And that just makes sense. You got Jimmy Rutherford, who comes in as the president of hockey operations, so he takes a bit of time in getting to know, number one, his ownership, getting to know the differing layers of hockey ops, organizationally, excuse me, what they've got going there. And then he makes some bold hires. He brings in Emily Castonguay as an assistant general manager, hires Patrick Galvin as GM, and then hires Hall of Famer Cami Granato as an assistant general manager. So there's a lot of eyes and fresh thinkers that are now involved with the Vancouver Canucks. And you need to allow that group time to really come to terms with what they have and what they want and what they ultimately need.
Yeah,
they need cap space. But I'm in the camp that believes, okay, I've seen Jimmy Rutherford's act before. I know that he gets stuff done. He just flat out gets stuff done. He's not very much a last minute guy. So it wouldn't be surprised to me if he were to find a way to unload some cap space prior to the trade deadline, and then do more of the heavy lifting perhaps in the offseason. And they've got some stuff that's coming off their books. So it's not white hot urgent. Yeah. Look, every time I talk to Jimmy or management in Vancouver about the JT Miller rumors or the Garland rumors, the Besser rumors, I get the same thing. It's no, we're not shopping these guys. But you also have to be, mindful to know that if somebody steps forward and makes that offer that just hits all the buttons, of course you're going to make a move, right? That's just common sense. But I understand why JT Miller is pissed off. I mean, we'd get sick of answering the questions day in and day out after a while too. I remember years ago, it was the Winnipeg Jets 1.0. So this is how old I am. And it was during the Steve Yzerman trade rumors. Detroit is in Winnipeg, and they come into Winnipeg, and I go to Yzerman's stall. I'm the only guy there. And I ask him about the trade rumors. And, man, he gave me those piercing, laser beam eyes. And he's like, what are you asking me for? And he wasn't quite as polite. He goes, Scotty's just down the hall. Go ask him. Yeah. And he turned, and and you know what? And so I did. I took his advice and I went and asked Scotty. And Norman gave me a great answer, by the way. But I've never forgotten, what that not that I was intimidated at all in the experience, but I thought to myself, okay, this guy's traveled to Winnipeg. He's getting this every single night. Yes. Every scrum he does, there's 2 or 3 questions about, his life, his availability and all the trade rumors. So I get it when players kind of get a little snippy with it because they do get weary of it, and their families do too, right? We forget how hard it is on the families.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll finish up on this one. Obviously, a great gold medal game. Canada, USA, the women's.
Loved it.
They win again. Great ratings for that game too. Thoughts on the women's game, Dregs? How it's growing? It seems to be growing and growing more and more. And obviously, a little bit more support as always could help out too. But thoughts on the women's game right now?
You know what? It's on the rest of us to continue to support the women's game beyond Olympic years, right? We celebrate when the Canadian women at varying levels win international events. Oh, we're cheering, we're pounding the desk, we're very patriotic. But when they're not playing in international events, we kind of forget the women's game to some degree, and that's on us, right?
Yep.
That's on Hockey Society at varying levels, and I'm not excusing media from that at all. The sponsor dollars, like everything about it, right? So, that's the disheartening thing, but I do think that strides have been made in that field. So I'm hoping and I'm expecting better. There's no doubt about that. I spent the night on a panel with Cheryl Pounder, who also did the Ottawa New York Ranger game with me. And we had a conversation about, she tackled the women's team, and she thinks that this team, 2022, is the best Canadian women's team ever. And look, I'm not going to argue with Cheryl, but she was on that 2006 team in Italy. I was there when the men's team just went kaboom. I mean, they were just awful in Italy. And the women's team, carried the load. And that was a loaded team, man, with talent. And Cheryl just says, no, you know what? I get it. I understand it. Trust me, this is a tough one for me. But this team, the way that they came together, the way that they controlled certain games, including the gold medal, man, hard to think about topping the 2022 Canadian women's team. So congratulations to all of them. What a fun watch, from Sarah Fillier to Marie-Philippe Poulin, of course, Sarah Nurse, the goaltending. I mean, and I'm just going to let you go with this because, as much as we celebrate when the Canadian women win, when the men's team does as poorly as it did, then we want a hockey summit in this country. Well, you know what? I mean, NHL players couldn't play for any other country. So we have to be respectful of what Russia did and what the Finns did, of course, in claiming gold. But the fact that the Swedes, under the supervision of Johan Garpenlov, who handpicked this team to play a style that he believed would beat the likes of Canada and the United States, and they executed to perfection. Well, that should be celebrated, And every young man that played for Canada in China gave their heart and soul.
Yeah.
For some of them, for many of them, it was maybe the highlight of their careers. So I'm not going to disrespect any of them and amplify the level of disappointment. A lot of variables went into Canada, the United States not going deep into the medal round, but I'm not taking credit away from the European countries that did a wonderful job either.
Yeah, no, very well said. We had Gilbert Brule on earlier this year, and he obviously played for Team Canada
Yeah.
at the Olympics Glasgow in
Mhm.
2018, and they won. But he just said that was a highlight of his career, how much that meant
It's
to him,
awesome.
and the relationships that he created. And and you did it, some of the teams don't win, and they'd still make those relationships, right? So
Yeah.
it's that's what it's all about. So. Dregs, we appreciate you again joining us for a record 6th time on our podcast. It means a lot. So always great to us and out here out west. So really appreciate that, and have a great family day and continued success as the second half of the season gets going here. We'll be looking forward to on Insider Trading, and you guys can get Dreg's podcast on all podcast platforms. You guys just had a great one with Darcy Tucker. So
Yeah.
so
Well, I appreciate your interest as always. I am proud to be the 2 months podcast record holder, and I always look forward to those Joshua Marshall emails. So keep them coming.
no worries. Perfect. Thanks, Dregs. Have a good one, and
Take care.
take care. Welcome back to the 2 months podcast presented by Shadified Salon and Barbershop. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. I'm riding solo today, but we got 2 great guests, Darren Dreger and Matt Benning, joined the podcast this evening. So we have some 2 great guests coming up here. We won't ramble on any longer. We want to thank everyone for joining in and liking, subscribing, and being a part of the journey that we have here at the 2 months podcast. So without further ado, we're going to go with our interview with Darren Dreger. And then after that, we'll have an interview with Matt Benning. It's a really good one. Take care.